allowing students to penetrate or to get deep into a subject, generally on their own with a bit of guidance. So in my mind, inquiry is, here's your question. Start with a question. Start with something you don't know anything about and find out where you as a learner are going to go.
I just act as their guide and their mentor. How would you find out about logos? What do we already know about logos? What has already been done about that?
I ask people to study a program that they've had questions about, but they've never really taken the time to stop and analyze and rip it apart and investigate it. So I'm teaching them the process of program evaluation and the skills that they need to know. But it's really up to them to say, you know, this is something that's been on my mind for a long time. And in the context of this course, I'm able to select a program, ask people I haven't asked before, spend some time with the learners or the people that are in that program, and really, on my own, find out as much about it as I can.
And so they spend the first semester doing a review of what's already been looked at. They'll look at mostly academic articles, but also the popular press articles, you know, who's changing a logo, why are they doing that? And then through that process, we'll slowly come to a research question.
Starting with a question is the most important thing to understand about inquiry. Not, if you follow these steps, you're going to know exactly what you need to know about it. Having it as vague as possible, which freaks students out because they're used to a lot of times having specific direction to follow. Having that vagueness as a part of it, I think, is also a strength of inquiry, and people aren't really comfortable with that. But when they get out the other end of it, they go, oh, okay, I've learned new skills, I've understood an area that I really didn't know much about before, I had an interest in it, which helps because that sustains people's commitment to the inquiry. But I think that having it not loose, but having it ill-defined and starting with a question is the most important part about it.
And so how are you going to answer that question? And so they learn that research is all about choosing a method to answer a question, not starting with a method, which hopefully good researchers do. And then that's the first semester. Then the second semester, they conduct the primary research, and that's always painful because primary research is always painful. And so if they're doing a survey, they don't get good response rate, or they're interviewing people and they're not finding out, you know, the interviews are going in this direction and they are trying to go in this direction. And so again, we help sort of mentor that process of, now what do you do? Now what do you do? What's the next step?
So they inquire about the program, they rip it apart, they look at it, and then they actually do the evaluation. So it's a continuation of that inquiry. It's a broader application of the process, and it's really, I think it really allows people to professionalize themselves, if that's a word. It allows them to understand something that, again, has been kind of gnawing at them, and then they realize that it's a good way of being able to investigate phenomena, artifacts, courses that are part of their everyday life.
But the fun part is we have it's an honor student forum on the very last day of class, and they present to all of the faculty and the other honor students what they've done and what they've learned. And there's tremendous pride in that because they've done it themselves. We've facilitated it, but it's really their project. And that's how we grade them or assess them as well. Have they taken ownership? Have they, it doesn't matter if it works out or doesn't work out, or, you know, you couldn't get the survey results. It's, did you learn about that inquiry process? It's really important to know how much time it takes. It takes a tremendous amount of time because you have to let the students come to the answers on their own. You know, you can guide them, but you don't just, it doesn't work. Sometimes people take an honors student and they say, well, here, just work on this project that I'm working on. Here's the research question, here's the data, just analyze this. They become sort of your assistant. They're not learning about how to do research, and also how difficult that is. I mean, if you hand someone a data set, they don't understand where that came from, and so I think there's a tendency to overmanage in the beginning and to say, you know, oh, just do this and answer this question, and I think you have to leave a lot of room for struggle and discovery.
It's a process that you need to become comfortable with and your students need to become comfortable with. As you become more comfortable with the inquiry process, That confidence will be picked up by your students. But for them, it's really different. They're used to having people giving them direction, and I think that's one of the beauties of post-secondary education, is allowing students a bit of flexibility, or a lot of flexibility.
In general, we tend to lay out a timeline. By this date, you'll have a research, you'll have looked at this research. By this date, you'll have the question. By this date, you'll have the method. And that works really well, because then you know it's time to intervene. It's time to say, okay, let me help you with that piece.
But the best thing you can do is explain the process to them. Let them know that it's important to have discussions and to unpack the process that they're going through, that they're going to be really scared at times. But if you can scaffold that and say, if you're running into a rough patch, come see me, we'll talk our way through it. But that whole notion of applying inquiry, because it's so radically different, I think is something that's going to take time for you and your students to become comfortable with.
To meet regularly, because again, students have other commitments, and we all know we do what is right in front of us and needs to be done right now. And so a weekly meeting really makes that commitment, like, oh yeah, we're going to meet, so I need to have something to show. Whereas if you say, well, come back in a month with a research question, that's really not helpful at all.